All right, everyone, we now have several new cases of Ebola in South Kivu province within the Congo. That's not good because they were hoping that they had it under wraps. They were hoping that they had locked things down, quarantine. Unfortunately, at least one of the cases is hospital transmission. That is, it managed to go from person to person in a medical setting. That's not good. You then have a fourth case that's been confirmed. You have potentially more cases. What was contaminated and why are people in a medical setting? That you'd think that that would be the least likely setting to transmit it in because of the protocol involved being so high level for Ebola. The fact that there was a transmission there is bad. And the fact is that there's still not that many treatments available. You've got these different materials that are capable of lowering the death rate of Ebola if you catch it early, especially before the person's symptomatic. The problem is manufacturing enough of it, managing to develop a vaccine that's effective. We haven't gotten that. You've still got, field trials going on with regards to the Ebola vaccine, but it's a little bit harder to actually check that and the results than it is the treatment. With the treatment, you've diagnosed Ebola, you give them the treatment, you see the differential in death rate. You can tell that. They know that it is effective. If you catch it early and you administer it right away, it lowers the death rate to single digits, which is actually really effective. It's amazing that they've managed to do that. Good on them. Unfortunately, most of the time, the person will be symptomatic, which means I believe if they have first stage symptoms when they've caught it, it lowers the death rate, but to like 25%. It's better than the 50-50. Unfortunately, in most cases, the person might have secondary symptoms already. Then it just lowers the death rate to like a third. That's still not highly survivable. That's smallpox level mortality we're dealing with, and we're acting like that's a great thing. It's not. They should overlap the treatments and administer them in multiple levels or something like that, see what happens. But this is linked to hospital transmission. Keep in mind, this is all a relatively small geographical area, but it is growing over time. It's in multiple large metro areas. I'm not sure if there have been any new cases in Goma. It would be good if they managed to snuff it out there. The problem is it's still in Butembo, a city the size of Boston. It's still in Beni, a city with, I think, 150, 200,000 people. It's still right on the border of several other countries in this general region. In a situation where you've got an ongoing sectarian civil war, you do have political problems with the Congolese government. It delayed elections. It's pissed a lot of people off. It's led to protests and burnings and riots. Now you have attacks on Ebola wards by people who are trying to steal equipment, as well as people conducting warfare. You have superstition involving, the treatment of Ebola and aid workers and stuff. It's a freak show, ultimately, is what it is. It's a huge problem. It's one the world isn't properly addressing, until recently wasn't even talking about. Once it hit Goma, it became an international emergency. All of a sudden the news talked about it. But even then, you get a lot of problems with regards to the situation. The money dries up. People lose interest in something like this, and the money dries up for research and for deployment and for, basically bribing doctors into going over to an Ebola zone during a civil war to go treat people. You got to pay them something. They're used to a nice cushy $250,000 a year or something. Like, I didn't graduate from medical school to go get shot off in the jungles of the Congo. It's just not going to happen. I expect at least some degree of safety while I'm there. I do want guards. I wouldn't be surprised if private security firms end up getting involved, if mercenaries end up having to be paid through the nose in order to guard these clinics, because the local governments will stop doing so. If a situation gets bad enough, mercenaries from the West may have to enter Central Africa. That's insane. It's insane that the world allowed it to get to the point that it's at. It's insane that they didn't start developing effective treatments more quickly. They shouldn't have waited for the West African Ebola epidemic in the first place, but they did. They waited for that particular epidemic. That's nuts too. So yeah. Unfortunately, we've got new cases there. The epidemic continues unabated. Hopefully they lock it down. They quarantine this hospital. They manage to stop new cases. But then it's just a matter of time before another case in South Kivu, if they manage to do that. Or a new case in Uganda, or it jumps a plane to Cairo, or any of a million other catastrophic things could happen in some of these areas that have high population density. The world, by and large, is still not aware that there's a serious epidemic going on there. They're not giving out updates like they did in the West Africa outbreak. I think that they're worried about a panicked response. Now, that's admirable that you would have the foresight to understand that. The problem is that if you don't get people a little bit scared about the possibility of it getting worse, how are people supposed to know that they can potentially help out financially, get their governments involved in the response in order to try to stop it? Ebola's no joke, and some people, they still, like, there will be people in the comments that are like, oh, hail Ebola, Chan, and they'll be, I understand most of it's tongue-in-cheek. The problem is that in today's day and age, it's one plane flight away from getting to North America or Europe or something too, where most of those posters will be from. Ebola is capable of spreading to the Western world because it's capable of mutating and becoming more resilient. We already know this. We saw it happen years ago. If it were to happen now that it's in a city of over 1 million people, yeah, that might be a problem. You'd have to quarantine the city. You'd have to kill anyone that tried to leave it. The international response would be quite hampered by labels like genocide and by the fact that the population of that city would quickly organize and try to force its way out. And then you'd see more sectarian struggle. You'd see insanity all over Central Africa. You could see nations fall because of such a thing. That's about all. Peace out.